And three, two, one. Well, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dada. I am the Quiet Warrior, and I'm excited to have on my show today a very special guest. Before I introduce him, and you might see him if you're watching this live stream, we're live streaming across LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. The power of disruption. This will be live streamed, and for those who will watch it later, welcome. We will also be producing it for the Quiet Warrior Show, which is an international podcast, and we'll be producing a YouTube video, and that will be released in the near future. So everybody just sit back and enjoy the interview today. And so I'd like to introduce you to my guest, Mr. Dan Cockerell. Hey, Dan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Tom, really appreciate you having me on. I love chatting with people, so thanks for the time.
All right. Yes, it's the age of COVID, and I can tell you I love your hair. I don't have a lot up there myself. For those who can see the video, that's my COVID-19 haircut. But Dan, I want to tell everybody how we met, and then we'll get into your story. So everybody, I'm a published author, and I came across an incredible book called How's the Culture in Your Kingdom? And it really stuck with me, seeing that I have a business background. And so I reached out to the author. Well, here he is, Dan Cockerell. We also share a mutual relationship through our publisher. Quick shout out to Morgan James Publishing in New York for bringing Dan's dream of his book to life. And so, Dan, why don't we start with you? I'm going to talk about you in a minute and build you up. But tell us one thing about yourself that you think most people don't know.
Boy, one thing people don't know. Well, something that I don't widely share, but it was a pretty cool way to grow up, was I was an only child. So that was a very interesting way. We traveled a lot, and my dad had lots of different jobs. So I got really good at making friends because I didn't have any brothers or sisters. So we'd move to a new neighborhood, and I was like, maybe second, third grade. I'd go door to door, knock on doors. Do you have any kids? That was back in the day when you weren't worried about getting kidnapped or anything. And then when I got married, my wife and I had 3 kids. So I always joke that I more than doubled the size of our family, going from 3 to 7. So it's a whole nother dynamic now. And when the kids were little, they'd have these fights. And I'd tell my wife, I said, they hate each other. Is this normal? She said, yeah, just wait 10 minutes. And 10 minutes later, everything was good again. And I had to learn, because like I said, I'd never seen siblings go at it like that.
Well, first of all, Dan, thanks for being vulnerable and sharing that story. Well, I guess I can tell you I'm the middle child. I don't know what that means, but sometimes it's a filter I see the world through. So it's great to know that, tell your story. It's funny because when you said that, my mind goes on a journey in different directions as I hear you talk. I thought about that after you said that if you're an only child, you don't grow up seeing what happens between siblings. And I have 2 brothers, and we take it for granted. So thanks for sharing that. Everybody, I'm going to hold it up here. This is the book we're going to talk about. Not just the book, but Dan's backstory, his ups and downs and challenges and successes. This is it, and I'm sorry if it's not that clear, but it's How's the Culture in Your Kingdom? There is actually a picture of a castle there. There you can see it a bit, Dan Cockerell. And Dan, if you can see all the little stickies hanging out, man, I've read this book from cover to cover, so I'm ready to talk about it. Everybody, let me tell you about Dan. I'm going to actually use the back of the book for his introduction. Let me first say what is written about this book. Culture is like the weather. It's the environment in which one works and plays. Every leader has the opportunity and responsibility to build the best culture possible for their people to thrive in. Before a leader can lead their team or their organization, they must learn to lead themselves. Well, Dan Cockerell, he started his Disney journey as a parking attendant. That got me thinking, Dan, you had a degree in political science, and I went, hold on a minute. From there to parking cars, over 26 years, 19 different jobs. Dan became the vice president of the biggest theme park in the world. Yes, you know it, the Magic Kingdom Park. During the course of his Disney career, Dan learned many life and leadership lessons, and he teaches those learnings within How's the Culture in Your Kingdom. Dan explains to us how to lead oneself and how to lead his or her team and organization by using relevant stories, practical examples from 26 years in Disney leadership journey. Pretty amazing background, Dan. I know along the way you started as parking lot attendants. I chuckled, but in your full bio, you fast-tracked and you did many things right up to vice president. So let's get into the story. This is about the hero's journey. I prepared you. I said, check the ego at the door. We want to hear the authentic story. Take us back to where it started, as far back as you want, even the day you were born, if you want. But how did you get to the point of the education, and then boom, I'm going to, get into this career? What was your life journey?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, when I was listening to some of your past podcasts, and we talked about overcoming big obstacles. I was talking a couple months ago with my parents and my wife, and we were chatting at dinner. And I said, I don't have a big dramatic overcome obstacle story. I mean, I was extremely lucky growing up. My dad grew up in Oklahoma. They didn't have any plumbing. Single mother. He dropped out of college and started working, and kind of worked his way up and did really well. And I was an only child. I had two parents. They've been married for over 50 years now, and they were just gave me great experiences growing up. My dad worked for Marriott, so we were moving all over the place. Every couple of years, we were moving to new hotel openings, and had a great childhood. I wasn't a great student. In hindsight, I wish I'd focused more on that, but that wasn't kind of where I was focused. And somehow I got into college, Boston University. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I ended up going into political science. It just seemed like a very interesting topic. I wasn't interested in getting into law. I wasn't interested in getting into politics or international or any of that. But it was an interesting journey. And I found growing up, I played sports. And I really enjoyed being with people and influencing people and being tested. That's one of the things I often compare sports and business. Sports is the ultimate accountability, because there's very strict rules, and you get feedback very quickly. If you dropped the ball or you caught the ball, or you scored or you didn't. So that was an area that I really thrived in. And I used to work. I started working mowing lawns when I was 11. I worked in a toy store. Then in college, I had a job, and I just enjoyed hospitality. I waited tables. And my sophomore year at BU, I came down on the Walt Disney World College program, and I did that for a summer. And it just seemed like I was also working at Marriott, the Copley Marriott in Boston, as a waiter in college. And it seemed like Marriott and Disney were both companies. In hindsight, I realized I really liked the structure. I liked the standards they held everyone to, and I seemed to thrive in that space. And not everyone thrives in structure. There's a lot of people who should not work at Disney, because it is very structured and there's lots of expectations. But I was wired in a way that I enjoyed that. And so when I graduated, I really didn't have a plan. And so I went back to Disney. I said, hey, I enjoyed working here. And they said, well, what did you qualified to do? I said, well, I have a political science degree. And they said, okay, you're qualified to park cars. So that's what I did. It was, I knew that I was going to be there for 6 months, because in advance of that, I had applied for the Euro Disney internship program also. So they were opening Euro Disney in 1992. And I got a work visa through school to work in Europe. And they'd recruited a lot of former European employees who'd worked at Walt Disney World to come back and train. And so when I came down, I worked for 6 months. And then January 1st, 1992, I got on a plane and flew to France to open, of course, the parking lot, right? Because that's what I knew.
That's right.
Tell you what, that is probably one of the most humbling experiences in my life, was going and living in another country. Visiting is one thing. When you live there, I mean, every day is a struggle. You're just trying to understand things. You're trying to understand culturally how things work, just how to pay for things, the names of things. I had like 4 words of French, and it was frustrating. And I just made the decision. This was not going to be something I was going to be a victim of. I wasn't going to be there a year from then and just say I couldn't speak French still. I said, if I go in there, I'm just going to say whatever I have on my mind, whatever word I can remember. And all my cast members, all my employees spoke French only in the parking lot. And so the first 6 months was just whatever I could figure out, I figured out. And after a year, when every single day you have to practice a language, it's unbelievable how quickly you learn it. And although I have to admit, no one ever asked me in the 5 years I worked in France what part of France I was from. That never happened. But I spent 5 years over there as a frontline manager and became even when my wife and I moved back to the United States, we didn't feel totally. She's from France, and
Yeah.
we kind of that idea you're citizens of the world because I picked up a lot of things in France that I really enjoyed. And when I came back to the United States, I had to sort of acclimate coming back. And we spent 23 years in Florida and working for Disney, just moving from job to job. I always said yes. I knew that getting diverse experiences was going to not only be a great career move, but it's also a great personal move. You just learn so much when you're open-minded and you're willing to do things. And I was continually a novice. I was in parks and I became an operations manager. I
Yeah.
went into hotels for 6 years. I was a novice, just figured that out. And so it seemed like I was always in my career, I was always on the learning end of things, and that kept it fresh. And you just come into work every day and you work really hard. And I happen to work in a place where my personal values align very readily with Disney's values. And when you have the values aligned, it's much easier to do a great job because you believe in what you're doing. And Disney's very
Yeah,
big
absolutely.
holding people accountable to results and holding people accountable to leadership behaviors. And you have to do both. You have to get the results, but you have to do them in the right way. And that's it's not always easy to do that, but it creates a great environment for people to get great work done and respect each other highly. And that's, I think, a big reason why Disney's so successful, because they look at the results and the behaviors, which a lot of companies don't necessarily do.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, first of all, thanks, Dan, for all of that. There's a lot there, and I use this on the show as a teaching moment. So catch your breath and just sit back there for a moment. I want to talk at you about something you said. I want to bring the book back to the forefront again. In the foreword of the book, everybody, I'm going to read this paragraph. It says, "I watched from afar as he climbed the leadership ladder at Disney with amazing speed. His success was not based solely on his charm, but rather his ability to apply good leadership principles and develop a productive climate in every organization that he led. It was created a culture of excellence in each case." And that was actually written by Lloyd J. Austin, the third General U.S. Army, retired. What's interesting to me, Dan, is that I'm not sure if you agree with this, but in the day we're in today with the next generations, they say the average employee will change careers maybe 7 or 8 times. Back where I came from, where you had like my parents' generation, they're lifers. People who stay 25, 26 years. They're coming into a very different world. The last thing I want to say before I get it back to you and we start getting into some of this amazing book is, you said that maybe you don't have this big back story. And I see the world through the hero's journey narrative, which is, how did we get where we are? So I'm going to play with you here and see if I can figure out your story, because I think I got something there. Sometimes people think that big backstories are always failures or big challenges, but let me give you some perspective. That when you said you're an only child, the millions who will watch this podcast over time, there can be many only children out there who will go, wow, that's me, and yet I'm stuck. I've always gone around feeling sorry for myself. I'm the only child. I never had brothers and sisters. I can't deal with adversity, and I wish my life was better. I saw also in your comments about you followed your parents, and it's amazing that you have that nucleus. But as a young person, you have to go from place to place. Man, that's hard for a lot of youth that I meet who have military parents, or even career dads. I orphaned my daughter for 5 years traveling, and man, that affected her in some ways. But you had the resilience to go from place to place. And I love the part you said, and everybody go back and listen to the beginning of the interview about when Dad said he knocked on doors as a young boy just to make friends. So what it is to me is that you overcame that thing that some kids can't, in being an only child, of having to move from place to place, not having the stability that some children need. And you were able to turn that somehow into a gift of developing relationships and being resilient enough to go into park cars and believe in yourself to climb the ladder. And man, if you'll take that from me, that is your heroic story that comes through in what you've done. The rest of it is just magic. So let's talk about the book itself. I'm going to keep looking at it and referring to a couple of things, Dan, and take you on a bit of a journey. When I give it back, you tell us why you wrote the book, first of all. But the first part here, it says in page, right at the beginning section, it says, I needed first to lead my direct reports well. None of this would happen if I myself wasn't fit to lead. That single realization that self-leadership is paramount to team or organizational leadership was the most valuable lesson I learned in almost 3 decades at Disney. I structured my leadership training around that very lesson, helping all cast members turn into leaders by first leading themselves. That blew my mind, Dan, because in the work I do, I always talk about the self, but in some of the people I meet through coaching in the leadership area, a lot of leaders who struggle have blind spots. They never learn to manage themselves.
Yep.
You use personality science, some of the things you said in there. Tell us more about this part of the book.
Sure. Yeah, I think Disney doesn't necessarily create balance for you. I think we talk about being a family company, but I think any job where you're going to work really hard, you have to create your own balance. And I've even seen that with I saw it at Disney, and I've seen it in other companies where people get plenty of paid time off and they don't use it because they're so committed, and either the company's putting pressure on them for results or they're putting pressure on themselves. And I don't think they realize this idea that people say, well, your career is a marathon. Problem is, if you run a marathon too far, you burn out. And,
Right.
and I'm a big believer in there's an institute down here at Lake Eola in Florida. I'm trying to remember the name of it now, but it's about the corporate athletes, and it basically says that your life should be a series of exerting energy and recovering. And that's what athletes do. And so you should work really hard, but then you should have that downtime to mentally, physically recover and get ready for the next up. And a lot of people never learn how to do that. They're just going all the time because they're really, they're focused on, I want to get the next promotion or I want to make more money. And I believe, I'm just a huge believer in there. You have to have a good holistic life. I've seen lots of people put all their eggs in one basket. Either, I'm just going to work enough just to make enough money and it'll be all about my family, or I'm going to make it all about my job. And I'll, when I get there, I'll then focus on my family. That never happens. And so I'm big on a holistic life and integrating life. And so I just found when I wasn't, times when I didn't have a good relationship with my wife or my kids or my parents, or we were having a rough time, it really impacted me at work. I wasn't great at compartmentalizing, and the same at work. When I was under pressure there, I wasn't as good a father, as good a spouse, as good a son. So I was always striving to get a good balance across everything. And balance it is, because you're never hitting on all cylinders. You always have something that's not quite right. You're working on it. But I just figured if I could take care of myself, I would be in a much better place physically to be able to do my job. I'd have more energy. I'd be more patient. I'd be more perceptive. I'd be in a better mood, and that would just influence everybody else. And when we wrote the book, we actually had a long conversation with a publisher who said, Dan, people are going to read a business book, may get turned off at the beginning thinking they bought some kind of self-help book because it's going to be leading self. And they're going to wonder where all the Disney management leadership stuff is. And Valerie, my wife, and I, we decided we're going to keep it at the front, because if we were going to put that at the back, we're going to do the same thing most people do with their lives. They're going to put themselves at the back also. So we wanted to make a point that has to come first. And it's, athletes do it. They have a certain diet, they have a workout routine, they get a certain amount of sleep, they keep track of their hydration. I mean, athletes do all this. I don't know why we don't think we should do that. And when you're in you feel really good about what you're doing, then you can go out and compete. Then you can go out and handle stress much better. You can go out and handle adversity because you're fit to lead. And I think it's such an incredibly important thing. And a lot of people always talk about how noble it is to sacrifice themselves and not get enough sleep or do everything for others. And it's just, it's a little counterintuitive, but you have to be a little selfish and take time for yourself so you can really be the person you want to be for everybody else.
Absolutely. Hey, Dan, there's so much in that. I want to just talking about that. My mind went on a journey somewhere else when you said about balance. I just want to tell you a quick short story that came to mind that I have a friend who's a chief executive officer of a pretty big company, and he's been in the company a long time, going up through the system. And every time I looked, he was winning awards and achieving, most successful CEO of the year, etc. And I was doing a side hustle. You might know that I had a brain injury from a fall a couple of years ago, and I started working at Costco as a night stalker. Believe it or not, going and lifting boxes to keep physically fit and active. And by the way, yesterday was my last day there, so I have some great memories that we can share over a beer one day. Uh, I'm at my shift there, lifting boxes one night, and I get a text message, and it said, "Please pray for me. I just had a heart attack." This is the same person that I thought, wow, they're on top of the world. But you see, the thing is, what always inspires me about when you talk about things like that, the balance down, is why people don't. Last part of my story I want to share with you is my granddaughter, 9 years old, Gemma. She's a sweetie. My wife's Italian. She's half Japanese Italian. My stepson married a Japanese woman, and she's over, and I'm cooking my passion, and she's on her phone, and she's 9 years old, and she's texting, and she's busy, and she said, "I'm so busy I've got." And the first thing I thought is, wait a minute, what? Why is she doing that? We're born into the world golden. Our neurons are empty of thoughts and emotions. Nobody tells us to be busy. And then I realized from my own burnout many, many, many years ago, before I got my life straight, that many people, especially leaders, have the personality type that they define their success by the things they get done, by accomplishments. There's another thread, Dan, if you know my story, and I know you like to get your opinion about all the cast members that you've worked with, but there's a lot of broken people in the world that come from adversity, challenges, and so they don't always feel they're enough. They're loved from past things that were put in them by others, and so they go out and achieve and think, if I get the next big paycheck, I get this stuff, I get this, I will feel better, and they don't. And so I think what you're doing here with this book and that teaching is amazing to me. I'll give it back to you to make any comments on that, but I also want to bridge into the next part that I want you to talk about, which is, in the book it says, as leaders, it is within our control and our responsibility to create the right culture for our organizations. It is also the most important thing you can do for the success of those with whom you interact. I find the word culture so confusing because it's funny, Dan, but many leaders I talk to and I ask, what does that mean? They can't articulate it. And if they can't, how do the 12,000 cast members you manage understand what that means? So talk to us about that. And then when I was saying about where do we get this burnout thing from, any comments about that?
Sure. Yeah, well, I think a couple things. One is, and my wife went through this. She worked for Disney, very successful. And when we had she was pregnant with our third child, she decided to quit and resign and be at home and take care of the kids. And it was hard for her because she said, and we had those conversations over the years, she said, I don't get awards and I don't get a bonus. And of course she had the most important job, was getting these kids around and getting them. And she spent much more time with them than I did. And so there was a piece missing there. And we do get, we can see the short-term benefits, I think, when we're working, of getting, it makes us feel important. And I love working. I love getting up in front of an audience and doing that. But the ironic thing is, companies, once you leave, you're gone. And I don't care how your title or how big a deal you are. My dad reminds me of this all the time. Your family is really the only thing over time that you're going to have with you, if you figure that out. Because, the next person steps in and the company keeps going. So I think we just, it's just, we got to, it's part of it is ego. Part of it is lack of self-awareness, of understanding really what is important. And I talk about this concept. It's not in the book, but I talk about the fact that, in our life, I think these windows open and close. There's things we don't even notice. And all of a sudden one day we're like, wow, what is that about? When I was a general manager in resorts, I realized, what? My kids are doing all kinds of charity stuff. I'm not even on a nonprofit board. I'm not doing anything for the community. Like, I got to get into that. And I found Junior Achievement and I got involved with him. But there's just things that if you're really going to grow your whole life, you should constantly be noticing new things you haven't noticed before. And if you think you're to the point now you've seen it all, you're done, because you never see it all. There's just so much to learn and so much to see. And people get burnout, just get so focused on one thing, and they only get their satisfaction and fulfillment from one thing. And when that one thing doesn't go well, they have nothing left. And so I look at, once again, having a great relationship with my parents, my wife, and my kids, and doing a great job at work and taking care of myself. I want multiple things to be able to sort of define myself by. But
Absolutely.
Coming back to your talking about culture, it's funny. You read the back of the book. The original title of the book was "How's the Weather in Your Kingdom?" And I love the weather comparisons and anecdotes. But the publisher was really good, which I trusted, Morgan James. They said, Dan, we love the title, but you're going to confuse everybody, and they're not going to know what the book means, because we get it once you read it. But culture is a much more powerful word. And I said, done. It's my baby, but I'm like, all right, I can trust you on that one. But I think there's two ways I think about culture. One is it's the way things are done around here. So if you're at home, every household has their own culture. When it's time for dinner, you just yell up, hey kids, time for dinner. Everyone comes down right away, because that's the way things are done around here. In some households, no one comes down, and the parents have to go upstairs and get all the kids down there. When I've seen football teams, some of them are very respectful and listen to the coach, and some of them don't. That's the way things are done around here. So I think culture over time is you realize, okay, you get into an environment and you start to adapt to it. And strong cultures have you adapt faster. And that and doesn't mean it's good or bad. There's really bad cultures, there's good cultures, but the ones that are strong, you adapt to quickly. And then the other piece of it is, I think, is culture is what a place makes you feel like. When you get into a culture, a strong culture, you can feel intimidated, you can feel scared, you can feel exhilarated, you can feel respected, you can feel excited. It's up to the leaders of the culture they create. So to your point, when I was at the Magic Kingdom, I'm one person. Now, I was the vice president, but at the end of the day, there's 12,000 people working there. And I can't go sit down with each of them and tell them, about what I think the place should be like. And so I had to create a culture. And I really do believe that 99% of culture is role modeling. As the vice president of that park, the way I acted, the way I interacted with people, the stories I created the culture there. So a good example is, I'd be out in the park every day walking around, and no entourage. I just go out and walk around and talk to people, and I could show up anywhere, a kitchen, anywhere. And so people start to realize, wow, Dan's out there all the time. And he's not out there to like find 5 things that are wrong and text us and tell us. He's out there to talk with the employees. He's there to find things that need to be fixed. He's there to find opportunities to recognize people's performance. And so after a while, the general managers start to realize, man, if Dan's out there that much, I better get out there too, because I need to be out there. It's an accountability tool. Yeah. And once they started doing that, their managers started to do that. And after a while, people start to realize, okay, this is a real thing. He really does care about what the frontline employees are going through, and we should all support them. And at a base level, everyone knows that. But when the executive spends their time in certain places, that becomes an area of focus for people. I'd go to the cafeteria, the employee cafeteria, and have lunch with people I didn't know. That was probably my only child coming out. I wasn't afraid to go eat by myself because I'd done that my whole life. So I'd go sit down with a group of people, introduce myself, and they're like, well, why are you here? I'm like, what do you mean? Well, don't you have like a steak lunch in your office or something? Because there's these stereotypes. And I said, no, I'm just down here to have lunch, and I was wanting to meet you guys and chat. And after a while, people started to realize maybe he really does just want to chat with us and have lunch. And now I'm finding about all these things that are working well at the Magic Kingdom and all these things that need to be fixed. And that role modeling, and that becomes the culture. It becomes the overall feeling that people have, and people realize what's important based on what they observe. And as the person in that environment, you set the tone. As a parent, you set the tone in your house. As a boss of an office with 5 people, you set the tone. And what you do, what you say, how you say it, what you value it's osmosis, and people start to learn what that is. And over time, culture forms.
Well, thank you, Dan. I'm just madly, for those listening, they can't see my head going down. I'm not trying to ignore you there. I'm making notes madly on my paper here, Dan. And you took me on another journey. I want to just throw a bunch of things out that I remember a scene in the movie with the late Steve Jobs about Apple, the company Apple, and walk in a room, and I never forget it. And all these computer guys were working, and he said, stop what you're doing, drop everything. Between now and the end of the day, I want you to create something. And I started thinking about what you said about culture, and what's amazing is you so nailed it, and where you get that innately from, I think, is a gift. The thing about culture is, and I think the publisher did nail it by saying call the book culture, because when I saw the word, my brain said I want to read it because that still confuses me. And so everybody out there is a leader looking for how to figure out this culture thing. They're going to see that book. But going back to Jobs, there are cultures out there. I've worked in many companies in different sectors, up the ladder, food chain. There's companies with cultures of fear, where you get called into the manager's office if you've done something wrong, but you don't get called in there to be congratulated. Right. Where, as you said, there's these silos where you can't get access to the top leaders, like there's some demigods. There's also cultures I've seen of innovation, and I never understood that. But innovation, really, to me, is in order to innovate, you have to be on the positive side of your brain. So it has to be a happy place. You can't have negative, positive thoughts. But also, a culture of innovation to me means it's okay to make mistakes. Because when you're trying to do new things, you have to make mistakes to learn and grow. And so there's so much there. I want to go back to Disney. I'm sorry. I wanted to say one more thing about your role modeling. I love that because I think you nailed it. That I read a book when I became a CEO a long time ago, and somebody gave it to me. They said, read this. I said, okay. And there's a thing in there that's never lost me. It said, when the CEO sneezes, the office catches cold. And that's where I really learned about if you're going to show up incongruent and be grumpy one day, because as you said so wonderfully, work, personal life, yourself, it's all connected. So if you have a tough day at home or something's going on with you, it's going to show up in how you lead people. There's so much in that about role modeling, and I don't think many leaders do that very well. They show up sometimes different, and they can't see it. I'm fascinated by 12,000 cast members, and many of us have been to Disneyland. When I talk to you, I go back. You need to know this because it's a gift you give me and the audience. When I talk to somebody from Disney, you're bringing me back to my childhood. You're bringing me back to my daughter being there when she was 3 and the little pushchair meeting Mickey Mouse. I'm having those memories now, and it's incredible. My parents split up when I was young, but I remember we went to Disney, and it brings me back to that time. So thank you for that. But 12,000 cast members, everywhere you go in the Disney world, you guys have tried to create this happiest place on earth, whatever. What is the culture? How do you define the culture of Disney? And just give us a few more tidbits about how do you get people showing up every day? Because I know that all those people in those costumes don't show up happy all the time. They got tough things that happen at work. The kids didn't. And then the pushy people in lineups and the people who get impatient with the heat. These people are working their tails off, yet I never had a bad experience at Disney. How did you get there to inspire these people to be part of that overall culture of the happiest place on earth?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say we probably stacked the deck a little bit. What I'd tell you is we try to hire people who we know are going to be successful in that environment. And, and people say, well, how do you hire someone for a job like that? And I've done, since I've left Disney, I've done a lot of studying on hiring because a lot of companies want to know how to do that. And that was never my specialty, but I've done some reading and studying. And there's a lady named Carol Quinn who wrote a book called Motivation-Based Interviewing, which I really love, and I really believe in her concept. And she said basically when you're hiring people, there's 3 things you're looking for. You're looking for skills, passion, and attitude. And the thing at Disney is, generally for most jobs, we don't hire for skill because there's a good chance you've never worked at Pirates of the Caribbean before. So we can't look past skill. So we're going to train you. And most of the jobs we hire for at Disney, we're going to train you how to park cars, how to work on a cash register, how to load an attraction safely. And so skills is not a really important area for us. Passion is why do you want to be here, which is important. But the most important thing by far is attitude. And when you talk about attitude, the way she defines it, which I believe in, is people with the right attitude overcome barriers and obstacles. They are internally driven. And it's just personal for them. They really don't care. They're not going to be driven by money or motivation or encouragement. They just are wired in a way that they're always going to be at their max effort. And obviously you can't hire 100% of people like that because they're not all wired that way. But we hire a lot of those kind of people who are just, I talk about the fact their thermostat is set at a very high level where they're just energetic, they have stamina, and they're outgoing. And so we talk about that in interviews. Tell us about a time when you were challenged and couldn't overcome the barrier. You couldn't overcome the challenge. You couldn't meet your goal. And we don't care whether they hit their goal or not, but what we want to hear from them is, I tried this, and then I tried this, and then I tried this, and then I tried this. And you want to hear people just saying, I never gave up. I always knew there was a way to get there. And I would love people working for me like that, because they were on top of it. They were enthusiastic about everything. Hey, what do you think about this? Let's go for it. Let's try it out. I'm like, okay, let's try it out. So first of all, you hire the right people. If you hire the right people, you're 80% of the way there. And then I think the one other big thing that we do at Disney that is very powerful, we have something called a common purpose. And, every company has a mission, why they exist, and they have a vision where they want to be in 10 years from now. But the common purpose is something that everybody shares together. And so we talk about role and purpose at Disney. So everyone has a different role. People park cars, they sell tickets, they're vice presidents, they're finance, they're merchandise, they're custodial. Everyone has a different job, but their purpose is all the same. And the purpose is, we are here to create magic for our guests. And once you start telling people that your purpose is more important than your role, and whatever job you're in, you're here to create magic for guests, all of a sudden, you're a college program cast member, you're a custodial cast member, you're the vice president, and you all have something very clearly in common. You're all here to make magic for your guests. And that outweighs everything. It outweighs rank, it outweighs hierarchy, title. And so we tell stories all the time. And we're always looking individually, how do we create magic for our guests? And all of a sudden, custodial cast members are creating bowling games during work, and they're painting with their brooms and water on the ground. They're creating art, because if you're working custodial and you empty trash cans, you keep the place clean, if you want to create magic, you got to get pretty creative. And people start getting creative because they know how important that purpose is. And it changes everything. It gives people permission. It empowers them to go outside of their role. It empowers them to make decisions. It empowers them to take risks and do things they wouldn't normally do. But because we give them great criteria to make decisions with, they're able to make decisions that are very, very good decisions. And they do things unexpected. And that's where you start to get that magic.
It is magic. More notes I wrote on my page here, Dan. A lot of teaching moments in what you said. Again, everybody, we're talking about the Magic Kingdom and 12,000 cast members that Dan was responsible for, hundreds of thousands around the world. Just want to play back. Dan said they focus on common purpose. And so if you're working at Disney on the front line, what that means to me is, when I go to work, my common purpose is to create magic for the guests. Now, how cool is that? And that is such an awesome point, because when I've worked for different companies, Dan, not at the C level, but below, and there's culture statements written and value statements on walls, and you walk through the trenches and you say to just average people at the front line, what's the culture of this company? They don't have a common statement. It's some executive or the consultant to put together something so confusing and so far out there.
Right.
And I'm going to say something controversial here, because it's kind of how I think, but I had this thought that when I look at the world, I step back and I look at what goes on in the world, and I'm not going to pick on America or Canada. You're our best neighbor. But here's the thing. In the world, I mean, I'm a South Asian man, but people get labeled as Hispanic or Black or this or that, fighting in the inner cities. No common vision or purpose, yet the president or the country has a common vision or purpose, set of values. Why is it that can't work in the world, yet in Disney it works? And what you said is the answer that I really wish through the work you're doing out in the world, maybe people can take this and apply it as world leaders, that you call everybody cast members. We're all part of the same family. We're all human beings. You have a purpose that they all can connect to. It's not about race, political strife, or anything like that. And so everybody comes to work with that one common purpose that they all can agree to. And you create love and happiness and magic. Why can we have people from all over the world and all different cultures coming together at Disney and coexisting like that? And why doesn't it happen in the world? I'm not asking for your answer. We could do another show on that, but I think that could be, the next book too. How's the culture in your country or whatever? But amazing stuff you're teaching. I want to go back to what we talked about earlier before I get you into the next quick question, and that is that when we talk about what's your big thing you overcame, and I told you that I think it's that being the only child and learning resilience. You said it again when we were talking about how you wandered out as a leader to sit in the lunchrooms and sit and eat with you. And I think you said something like, I never had a problem sitting by myself or meeting
Yeah.
people because you had to as an only child, go meet people. You were drawn to people. And I read it in your book that you and I have the same personality. I'm what they call blue. My personality motive is intimacy. I get more things done through other people, and relationships are important. Well, dude, that's you. And so you're an only child. You didn't have that, but you turned it into a gift. So I saw it again there, which is pretty amazing. Teaching moment for leaders. Listen to that, everybody. And I hear this sometimes, Dan, if you're a leader who thinks, you're too big to go out and sit in the lunchroom, what I've discovered, especially at Costco recently, is that that's where you hear all the chatter of whether people love or hate their job, about what's really going on. So get out there. Dan, there's so much in this book, and we won't be able to cover it all, but I love this one part, page 80. It's in the, I got to say, too, the way the book's laid out, everybody, it gives you a bunch of learnings from Dan's stories, experience at Disney. But then at the end, he's got fast track to results, a section on all the key points. So you can actually flip through the book, and there it is again, the amazing cover. And this one says how to build relationships with your direct reports, and then how to build relationships with your boss. The point I highlighted under that was make it easy for your boss to give you feedback, acknowledging areas that you need to improve on. And then further on, there's a section about how to give feedback. It's probably one of the areas in culture that I see people get so wrong. And sorry to the bosses out there, but the next generations, I believe, Dan, and you can tell me what you think, they don't want, they want coaches and mentors, and they want to be given feedback real time. But I don't believe a lot of leaders who grew up in the old command and control style system know how to give feedback. And a lot of employees are afraid of, and they leave because of their managers, not because of the company. Tell me about that, how to build relationships with your boss, direct reports, feedback.
Sure. Yeah, well, I used to ask, I'd ask my leaders when we did sort of roundtable discussions, I'd always say, what's the most important thing that you need to do before you give feedback to one of your people? And everyone had all these techniques and came up with all these ideas. I said, have a relationship with them. I said, there's going to be times when you're going to have to give feedback, performance feedback to someone you don't know very well because they're not meeting a Disney standard. But if you can form a relationship with people, you can be more candid, you can be more direct, and giving the feedback is only 50%. People actually changing their behavior is the other 50% that we forget about. And a lot of leaders say, well, okay, I told them what I thought, so we're done. I'm like, no, you're not done. Now you got to go back and find out if they actually are going to change the behavior, whether they're not going to be sarcastic anymore, or they're going to start using the right greeting when you come to a restaurant, whatever that was. And so I found over time is when I had a really good relationship with people, I wasn't nervous. I'd tell them in a meeting, if I thought they said something that was maybe not the right response, or I saw how they maybe did something in the park, I could just tell them. And they go, wow, I didn't notice that, but thanks for giving me a heads up. And they'd come back with me and they'd tell me how what they were going to do to change that. And it was great. And the problem was a lot of times people get defensive. You say, well, I don't want to give them feedback. They're such a high performer. I don't want to demotivate them. The fact is, high performers want more feedback because they want to get better. And so not only is it your responsibility as a leader to give feedback, you are responsible to deliver that experience to your customers. And if you don't give feedback regularly to your people on how to be better, you are not doing your job. And secondly, if you don't give feedback to your people, you're doing them a disservice because, it's kind of that grade inflation. If you never give them feedback, they think they're doing great. And the day they go get a new boss, there's going to be a bunch of things that they're not exceeding because you never told them and they thought they were at the right level. And so you're really impacting their career. So there's so many reasons to give feedback. And I think the main thing is, and here's the number one thing you need to do, practice. There's all kinds of ways to do it and techniques, and you can study it and practice. But if you practice it, you'll get better at it over time. And if you constantly force yourself to give people feedback, reward and recognition, critical feedback, it has to be both ways. But if you become comfortable doing that, you are going to retain people because people want to hear the straight deal. They're not always going to like to hear what they hear from you. But if you do it the right way, they are going to listen and they're going to get better. It's kind of like, I'm not going to say employees are like kids. A lot of times our kids, we would tell them things and you don't think they're listening, but they're listening and they make the change because they end up hearing you. And so whatever it takes. There's a great book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, which is it's one of my favorite books on feedback. And it talks about this idea that you need to direct people or challenge them directly and care for them personally. And if you do both of those things, you're going to be a great leader. If you care for them and you challenge them. Now, if you challenge them, you don't care for them, you're just a bad person, mean person. And if you care for them and if you don't challenge them, but you care for them, you're sort of a pushover and you're not doing them any help. So if you care and you challenge, and once again, that's the way we raise kids. We care for them and we challenge them because we want them to make the right decisions. It's the same with your employees. So you need to figure out to find that courage if you don't have it today. And if you don't have it, you really want to think about whether you should be in a leadership role or not. It's so essential. It creates the right environment. It creates the right culture. It creates trust. It creates credibility when you're candid with people. So.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Go back to your sports analogy, how you were in sports, and you said sports taught you accountability. And in a lot of cases, I've seen that where people are doing jobs and a year down the road, they get some feedback they should have had 9 months before. And it's like, why didn't you tell me? And I think one of the toughest parts of feedback for me has been dealing with conflict. A lot of you use personality science you talk about in your book. By the way, my Myers-Briggs was ENTJ, just so you know who you're talking to. And I've done many personality science, but I think you nailed it in that, everybody, Dan said, learn who you are yourself, learn your strengths and limitations, and then that will give you a bigger picture. So if you're trying to give people feedback, Dan, and you fear the conflict, you're never going to get feedback. I think it ties into all the work you've done with this book, that before learning that feedback, understand what your strengths and limitations are about that. Share with you another personal anecdote that my father was a military commanding officer. He was in the British forces and became that in Canada, where came as a boy. And my dad's feedback was always pretty tough. And so I took the rules of that into leadership, and it didn't work. The first 10 years, I had 360 feedback from my coaches saying that, you're winning awards, you're getting good, but you're having trouble relating to people. And I realized that nobody really taught me how to be assertive in a good way. And when I had people coming, leading me, and they were using the command and control style, I actually feared it because that was my father. Yep. So being a great person to give feedback, and I'm going to read that out again. Radical Candor book, everybody. I'm going to put it in the show notes that Dan recommends about feedback. Yeah. One other one I learned from was called The Oz Principle, based on the Wizard of Oz. That's one of the books that was given to me about feedback, and I'm still learning. My definition of feedback, Dan, that I learned, and I'm going to read that book now, is feedback's a gift. You don't have to agree with it. It's what you do with it, how you reflect, and become better.
Right.
My definition of leadership is leaders' number one job is to create other leaders. And listen, you nailed it, because how do you create other leaders if you're not giving them feedback? How are you teaching them to give feedback to their people? Right. And I think in all the years I've worked in the corporate sector, 5 different sectors, there haven't been very many bosses that have been able to give me feedback. And so thank you for teaching that and even helping me grow. We're getting down to the wire here, but I want to bring out one other point. This book has so much great stuff in it. Everybody, you got to get it. When you do read it, go to where you bought it and write a review for it, which helps Dan's work get known.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Dan. There's 2 things, actually, just let you talk about it. Well, I love this on page 132, design your training based on the experience your customer expects. It's like, wow, I don't know how many training departments actually do that and actually know what their customers expect. And then the last point which is a quote, power creates distance, leaders bridge the gap, Phil Wilson. And this goes to what you said, that I was listening to an interview done by John Maxwell, of the CEO of Delta Airlines. And the CEO actually said, you know what? Many people in the company will never see you. And so he said we used to go in plain cold and sit on flights between people and talk to people and just show up. Yep. That is such a huge teaching moment. I even read in your book that you would jog around the Disney, I call it the campus, but the kingdom, and just people didn't even know who you were, and then you say, hey, hi, it's me. Everybody, you got to get out there and be Dan. So Dan, just go back to that. Design your training like the experience your customer expects. And then another nugget, tell leaders if they're managing virtual teams that are spread around the world or even multiple sites, give them again a nugget of how how you were able to bridge that gap.
Sure. Yeah, I think with the training piece, there's something called we called it performance alignment at Disney, and you start with the manufacturer's recommendation of how to operate something. So there's always a technical guide. Here's how this restaurant operates, or here's how this attraction operates, and then you have to take that information and you have to incorporate the technical part, but then how do you want the experience for the people who are actually visiting that to be? And that's when you get into the soft skills. How do you greet them? How do you make sure you create those magical moments with them? And then that training has to be translated into a training document. And that training document has to be consistently trained. And a lot of companies, you get the person training you says, well, look, this is what the manual says. That's not how we do things. Let me show you how we actually do it. So you really got to figure out, and a lot of companies don't have the discipline to get into the weeds and the details to make sure all their documents are aligned, and they train people the way you actually want them to perform. And so that's one thing. Make sure you go check. And then after people get trained, use the training guide as your document to audit the behaviors. So if you're training people to greet people with howdy partner when they walk up the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad attraction, when you go up to that attraction, if they're not saying that, something's wrong. Either they didn't get trained the right way, or the leaders are not holding them accountable to use the greeting that we all decided on. It was going to make the best experience for the guests. And then constantly talk to your customers and find out, get in their shoes, find out what it's like to be them. Go do mystery shops. Go call your business. If you have a call center, call your 1-800 number. Go through those processes, because I bet a lot of executives listening have not experienced their product or service in a long time, because they're so busy running the business, they don't have time to get out and park the car in the parking lot and take the tram in and take the monorail. And I used to do that frequently because I wanted to see what that experience was like. And it was like every day was a new surprise. And I couldn't spend all my time doing that, but I certainly had to go back, because that's where the moment of truth is. That's where your customers are going to decide whether they're going to come back again and whether they're going to recommend your business. Not because who you are, it's because of all the hundreds of people your employees are interacting with. And so if your leadership is not translating to make those employees better, then you're really not creating any value. So that's a big part of the job, I think, is make sure you're training things that actually are useful and valued by your customers, and listen to them. The problem is we become experts in our business. We stop listening to customers because we know better than they do. And if they don't get it, then we don't know what's wrong with them. In fact, I'd be at meetings, we'd say, if it wasn't for all these guests, this place would run really smoothly. We wouldn't have any problem. And of course, that's a way it goes. But
of course.
And then, what was the second part of the question?
It was just simply about the that quote about how to be a virtual leader. I mean, how to bridge that gap from not being. Yeah, I mean, we're in a virtual world now, but you ran a big organization. I think everybody knows that you couldn't be everywhere. But how do you do that?
Right. Yeah, I think the way I look at it, all the principles of leading people remotely are the same as leading them in person. You just have to recreate the dynamics that happen when you're there in person. So in my office, I might run into one of my general managers in the hallway. Well, if I'm working remotely, I'm not going to run into them because we're not at the same place. So I have to put reminders on my calendar to text them, maybe 2, 3, 4 times a week or multiple times a day. Hey, how you doing? What's going on today? I'm checking in on people, creating the water cooler, having office hours, having people say, I'm available. Or when you get up in the morning, hey guys, it's 8:30. I'm online. Here's what I'm working on today. I have availability between 10 and 11. If anyone needs to stop by my office, quote unquote, call me or Zoom call me, and create the same dynamics as if you were together. And technology today, the fact you and I can sit here and look at each other and talk, it's amazing. And there's no reason we can't do that. Having those chit chat moments, calling people and not talking about when the next project's due or what you need from them. Just, hey, how you doing? What are you up to this weekend? On Friday, having, hey, what's everyone doing this weekend? How are your kids doing? Just create that downtime where you're not trying to get anything done. You're just trying to socialize and bring the team together. And when we get under stress and pressure, we stop doing that. And then everything becomes work all the time. And once again, if you want to create a culture where people feel like they want to help each other, they have relationships, they feel valued, you are going to find time to have those one-on-one. How you doing? How are you coping? If you know someone has little kids at home, it's hard. So empathize with them. Talk to them about that. Give them an opportunity and ask them if you can help them. And, most of the time they're going to say no, but they're going to love the offer. And sometimes they're going to say, yeah, I'm not quite sure how to manage this. My wife and I both are working remotely. We have the 2 kids at home, and, maybe go find a couple of articles about how to, work homeschool, or maybe say, you know what, for a month, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give you a little mini bonus because you're such a high performer, and I'm going to help you hire somebody. There's so many solutions that we can be creative to do. So you just got to get away from the normal work and just find out ways to differentiate the interactions you're having with your people. And it'll go a long way, because a lot of people never think of that. It's all about work.
It's amazing. Everybody, we're talking about how do you lead 12,000 cast members at Disney when you're one guy, Dan Cockerell, and interrupts and things. Dan, you inspired me to remember a few things. I remember I worked for a company in Canada, the largest telecommunication company, as part of a leadership team there. And the CEO, a young fella from the UK actually, he created a video, and in all the screens and elevators and things, he would just pop up sometimes and just talk to the employees. So they say duplicate yourself. You nailed it when you said about technology. I mean, our kids now, we can FaceTime on the other side of the world. I think leveraging technology is cool. The other thing is this whole thing about the customer experience and building your training for that. I don't know why it's lost on so many companies. I see it a lot in the IT sector. Maybe that's a place where they're going to want you to teach too. But a lot of systems are built from the technology shop, and they get put out into companies like CRM systems or sales systems, and they don't reflect what the end user actually does.
Right.
And then all these changes have to be made. So again, a teaching moment, everybody. Dan talks about how you create your training from the customer experience and what your customers have. I think that is a redo in some organizations. Dan, we're pretty much to the end of the interview here, but I'm going to throw something out here that probably going to force you to say, Tom, I got to come back again. So I'm being a bit manipulative here, but it's sort of the elephant in the room, which is COVID-19. And I'm going to throw out the word paradigm. Paradigm, what I learned is when the rules of the game change, what you did in the past doesn't matter anymore. And so there's companies dying out there trying to recreate themselves to deal with this change. I know Disney's gradually opened some things. And, how do you now, when you're at this point, it's an inflection point in the world with everything you've learned, and you look ahead of the world you can't see, what are some of the thoughts that come to your mind, just briefly, and then would you come back to talk about really
Sure.
how to deal with change that we sometimes don't know what it is?
Yeah. Well, there is no silver bullet. There's no magical answer. It's been hard for everybody. I had 6 months of stuff gone, speeches and travel, and all of a sudden it's gone. And my wife and I are looking at each other saying, what do we do now? And there's another great book by another Carol Dweck. It's Carol Dweck, called Mindset. And it's about having a growth mindset. It's about seeing opportunities. It's about looking for the silver lining. It's about saying, you know what, I'm not going to curl up and be a victim. I'm going to go figure things out, and I'm going to try things. Some things will work and some things won't, but I'm going to get up every day and I'm going to go at it. And that's what I think life's about. So, my wife and I, we've created a college course. We've only sold one of it, but we created a management course based on my book, and that's a product that we have now. And we created a webinar, a walk in the park around the Magic Kingdom, and we do that every month. It's a pay for webinar. So we just said, look, we're not going to sit back and just wait. We are going to get busy. We have something to teach people, and we're going to think differently about things. We're going to connect with people, and we're going to be active. And I'm still running every day. I'm swimming. I'm staying in shape. We meditate. I'm talking to people. I'm talking to people all the time, because you don't know where the next business opportunity is going to come from. And I know things will get better over time. But once again, people who have a fixed mindset or maybe more practical, they think that people with a growth mindset are naive. How can you be positive in an environment like this? Everything's fallen down, all the opportunities are gone, and they don't understand those people. People with a growth mindset, they don't care. They're just like, look, we'll figure it out. The world's been spinning for thousands of years, and we're going to get up every day and figure out a way to get things done. And if you can keep that mindset, it's hard to do constantly, But you can't, like you said, you can't control what happens to you, but you certainly can control how you react to it, and that's up to you. And you can decide to be down and depressed and demotivated, or you can just go and look for new ways to do things. And the more you open your mind, the more doors will open, and that's what innovation and creativity is.
I think that's so awesome. John Wooden is a famous basketball coach, and you might know. Said something like, "It's what you learn after you know it all that really makes a difference." And I took your advice, Dan. You didn't know this, but I see COVID. I mean, I run my own business. I've run into similar issues with not being online and having to pivot. Disney certainly is having to go through some things and learn. What I did was I said, "Hey, I'm going to listen to some more audiobooks to learn," and I actually went out and found a couple online courses, and I took. And by the way, one of them is the COCKERELL Academy. I just joined that to take the time management course, and you know what we're talking about there.
Sure.
This is an opportunity, and you heard it from Dan. Everybody, read his book, get some of the nuggets, create something for the future. This opportunity is brought to us, and it's those leaders who see that they can vision and do something with it to make the world a better place. I think people are going to be stronger and more resilient, but I do want to have you back to talk about dealing with change and the stresses, the mental health part of it. So would you come back again to spend some time with me on it?
Anytime. Just let me know.
All right, man. We'll do that. If I could get on a plane and fly down to Florida and sit in your backyard with you, or even on the lawn of a Disney place, I am going to ask you for this, and this is kind of childish, but my wife says you're a big kid. My dream was always to be a cast member at Disney, and you said something about Pirates of the Caribbean, which, how did you know, was my favorite ride next to when Indiana came up. But no matter how you do it, at some point in the future, I want you to arrange for me to get to spend the day helping run that that ride. I'll bring my interview gear and I'll do a remote interview and do something powerful for your team or the team that you work with there. So
good. Well, people at Disney will remember me for about another year, and then I'm done. So you better understand.
Okay. All right. We better get on that. That, by the way, is something that stuck in my mind when you said that, Dan. That I remember I said this to my wife when I went through my first downsizing. That you think you have friends, and then the world becomes about that big, and really what you have is your family. So when you talk about balance, that's what you're going to have. And all those people you thought were your friends, they weren't really your friends. They were part of your connection, your job. Hey, Dan, it's time for me to honor you, buddy, because there's so much great things you talked about. You may know this, you may not, but as I interview, I write down on my paper leadership words just from what you said. So I'm going to honor you with these words. They will be part of this. The first one is thought leader. You're a thought leader, meaning you see the world and you share your thoughts. Amazing to me. 2 is authority. Well, you're an author now, but in the word author, it comes from the word authority. You're an authority on, and I found it in you. Your big thing, the chip on your shoulder was I was an only child, and it forced you to go out and learn how to build relationships and gel people together and push through the fear of the unknown. And well, you're an authority on seeing the world through building teams and leading people. Not every leader knows how to do that. 3 is contribution. They say that when you leave the world, what are you going to do with your legacy or contribution? I think when you and Valerie decided to write a book, create these programs, you're going and taking what you learned in 26 years in Disney and giving it. You're going to get rewarded for that. That's amazing. The last one, or the 2 more, one, I put worldview down because you started talking about France and then talking about, but you have a view of the world, which is helpful for all businesses to learn. And then my last one is I put intimacy/role model. What I mean by intimacy is the term I use from personality science, that you get things done through developing relationships with other people. You need people like that in the world as leaders who can build teams to run the world. And then role model, you're it, man. You are the kingdom. You're the leader of the kingdom. So there's only one other person like that I look to, and he's above. So it's an honor to have you on the show. The last thing we're going to do, and I'm probably going to surprise you on this, but you're getting an award today. Did you know that?
I did not.
Okay. Well, bear with me for another minute. That if you see my screensaver, you see a picture of this thing. It looks like it's a coin of some kind.
Yeah.
And those who aren't watching, they'll hear this. They can come and watch the YouTube replay. When I started the show, and we're now at over 154 interviews in 11 countries, it blew my mind. It was just an idea. But what I said is I want leaders to come and check their ego at the door and be authentic and real. Not just come and brag about how great they are, but tell us the failures, the learnings, and they will join the Quiet Warrior tribe, the Quiet Warrior community. These are people who forever commit to using their purpose, their passion, to take action, to make an impact on the world. What you see behind you is a coin. These are called challenge coins, and they were actually invented in World War One. And people carried them in the war in their units to commit community. You didn't have yours with you, maybe you'd buy drinks, you'd have some fun. Today they're used around the world by first responders, by any organization, community. My father was in AA Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and he had coin. So I created this for the show, and on the front is the show art, and you'll see there's that guy there. That's actually me. They're hand painted and crafted with raised letters, and the back is actually the hero's journey narrative, the description of it illustrated, which Joseph Campbell left us in his body of work about that journey we take as leaders. It's going to come to you in a cherry box, and so effectively today, I honor you by bringing you into the Quiet Warrior community. And so far, there's about 150 of you around the world doing amazing work. So welcome.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Tom.
You're welcome, Dan. Well, everybody, we're going to wrap up here as Dan smiles and we get ready to leave him. The book is called, I'm putting up on the screen, How's the Culture in Your Kingdom? Lessons from a Disney Leadership Journey, Dan Cockerell. You got to get it. You got to read it. You got to put the stickies on it like I did, mark it up and teach it. And get a hold of Dan. Maybe he'll sign one for you. By the way, Dan, I'm going to plug for you. Dan does workshops and things where even in COVID times, he can come out and spend time with you. So, Dan, tell us where we can get a hold of you and all of this stuff if people want to kind of connect.
Sure. COCKERELLconsulting.com. Everything that you need to know. Valerie, like I said, she worked for Disney for many years and was a facilitator at the Disney Institute. So we're working closely together now. And we do workshops, we do coaching, we do consulting. And, we use our Disney experience and what we learned over time to create these cultures and environments for world-class service. And then COCKERELLconsulting.com is where you can find everything you need to do to reach us.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Everybody, there it is. We'll put it in the show notes. So I'm going to wrap this up and say that thank you, Dan. This episode will be left now on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. You can watch it immediately if you're on the feeds I have. Secondly, we'll produce it into the podcast and a YouTube video, which will be released in the near future. And so look for that. Find this show, give it a high rating to honor Dan's work. And everybody live with that passion. Find your true purpose like Dan did and live the life that you deserve and desire. Dan, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks very much, Tom. Thanks for listening, everybody.
You're welcome. Stand by.